Please drop a like and comment your own story. And join us as we explore the internet's craziest glitch stories. Story 1. I didn't go to Sedona to chase anything weird. My wife and I went because her mom was sick and the family needed help. February, blue sky, cold. That quiet season when the tourist buses thin out and the red rock looks like something the earth pressed up through its skin. I get why folks talk about the energy there. I'm not hooked on crystals and tarot, but even I felt it. The air like it's humming through a guitar string you can't see. We ran errands, cooked soups, did hospital runs, and tried to keep the visits light. In between, we took the kinds of breaks you can take when you don't have much time off. An hour here, a cup of coffee there, a short walk when the sun warmed the street. On our next to last day, we cut through one of those lanes off the main drag and found a shop tucked back like it didn't care if it was found. Not tourist junk, no lime green scorpion paperweights. More like a place where the shelves had been arranged by someone who cared if you picked up the object and noticed it had weight. I've loved space stuff since I was a kid, old Hubble posters, the swirl of a spiral arm, and there it was on a low table, a piece of dark, polished basalt carved into a spiral, palm-sized dents. It looked like a galaxy pressed into a river stone. The groove caught the light. I set my thumb in it, and the fit felt inevitable, like the stone had been waiting for my hand. I turned it over, flawless, cool, heavier than it had any right to be. I bought it. I told myself it was a paperweight for my home office, but really it was an anchor. Back at home, I set it on the right corner of the desk. I work on the phone a lot, clients, vendors, site managers, and found myself thumbing that spiral while people talked themselves in circles. The stone picked up a little warmth from my hand, a faint mineral smell that was probably my imagination. The groove under my thumb was a track I could follow without thinking. It made me listen better. For a month, that thing was part of the landscape of my workday. Right corner of the desk, a small galaxy holding down a stack of Post-its. Then March got busy. Flights, early alarms, hotel coffee, fluorescent server rooms that smell like dust and ozone. I came home, dumped my suitcase, and did the usual re-entry. Laundry, email, stack management. At some point during the cleanup, I reached for the stone and felt the air instead. You know how your hand knows exactly where the scissors live, and when they aren't there your brain stumbles. Like that. The corner was bare. I moved the papers. Nothing. I cleared the desk, under the monitor arm, behind the stapler, under the phone dock. I looked beneath because a spiral can roll, but it's a rock. It doesn't go far. I got on my knees with a flashlight and checked the cables, the floorboard seam, the dust bunnies that collect against the wall. Nothing. I called my wife in. We did the married version of a search. She looks in the places I haven't thought of. I retrace my own steps and say out loud the last time I remember holding it. We expanded the radius. Office closet, hallway shelves, living room surfaces, the junk tray by the front door where screws and washers retire. We found the stuff you always find when you're not looking for it. Old USB sticks, a long-lost guitar pick, not the stone. That night we were the kind of tired you get from being stubborn. Over the next week, we did it all again and then again. Deep clean, corners, vents, even the vacuum bag because grief is a weird animal, and mine had decided to fixate on a Sedona souvenir. Eventually we declared it gone. I said I was disappointed and tried to mean only a little. You can't carry everything. Spring turned to a thick Midwestern summer and then let go, and in early September I got tapped for another on-site. You don't choose the city, the job chooses it. Overland Park, Kansas. Same place I got sent a couple years back when a ghost story got stuck to me like gum on a shoe. Same hotel, because apparently corporate ritual is a thing. I took my work bag, the gym duffel sort with side pockets for tools, and packed light, clothes, chargers, basic kit. I'm one of those people who actually uses the hotel dresser. It gives you the illusion of control. First night in, I emptied the bag completely. T-shirts rolled, socks paired, tools set on the desk. I tossed the bag by the armchair in the corner and go do my work. Last night of the 4, I decide to pack so the morning's easy. I pick up the duffel and immediately feel it. Weight. Not the whisper of a loose cable or the rattle of a hex key. The kind of weight that tugs your shoulder into a question mark. The bag had been empty. I know empty by how it lifts. This wasn't empty. I set it on the bed and unzip. The room hums the way hotel rooms hum, a steady air handler, a faint rattle in the vent. And there, sitting on the bottom of the bag like it had grown there, is my Sedona spiral stone. Same polish, same thumb groove. A small galaxy in a nylon cave. My breath snagged. I took a step back because my body wanted more room than the bed allowed. The first thought was stupid in a very human way. Maybe I packed it. But the last place I had seen it was months earlier on my desk at home before it vanished, and I didn't take this bag to Sedona. We took suitcases then, the kind with wheels that sound like zippers on sidewalks. This bag is for work trips only. It lives in the closet with my spare tools, and it doesn't get invited on vacations. I lifted the stone. Cool, then not. The groove took my thumb, and for a second I had this dumb idea that if I turned it one way I could reverse time like a drain. I turned it anyway. The air handler sighed. My brain did the thing where it tries on explanations like shirts. Maybe my wife found it and tucked it in as a surprise. Except she would have said something. Maybe I knocked it into the bag in March when I got home and didn't notice. Except I had emptied the bag that very night in the hotel and chucked it in the corner. I know an empty duffel when I toss it. Maybe the stone was never really gone, just relocated by some gap in the world I don't have a name for. 5 months and 1,000 miles is a long way for a rock to choose to travel. But what else do you call it when a thing disappears in one state and reappears in another, timing itself to your routine like it wants an audience? I put the stone on the hotel desk, right corner, out of habit. The desk fake wood reflected a little dark halo under it. I stood there listening to the vent and the distant elevator bell, thumb hovering, not touching, like it might be hot. I thought of the shop in Sedona and the way the spiral caught the light, and of my mother-in-law's breath when she laughed softly at something small. I thought of missing things and returning things, and of how some objects hold a little gravity, enough to bend your day around them. I didn't sleep badly, which surprised me. In the morning, I packed the stone first and checked the bag twice, 3 times. When I got home, I set it back on the right corner of my desk where it belonged. Story 2. I was 3 the first time Lily played tricks with the world, though I didn't have her name then. It was 1983, Nana's house on a Sunday when the telly was too loud and the boiled cabbage smell sat in the curtains like a ghost that had paid rent. Mam and Nana weren't speaking proper, same as always. I was the tidy little parcel passed back and forth on holidays and grudging afternoons. Go on, love, Nana said, setting a photo album on my lap like it might bite. That's your mam when she was only a wee thing. The album was heavy and smelled of damp paper and polish. I remember the crackle of those plastic sleeves like frost. Mam came to me in pieces, scabbed knees, a ribbon squint, a jumper that had seen better winters. I turned a page, and there was a class photograph, front row, Mam in her best smile, chin tucked so the teacher wouldn't shout about pride. I turned another page, and felt the hair rise on my arms. It was the same photo. Same rows, same window glare, same teacher with the damp fringe. Only Mam had both hands slapped over her mouth. Not like a laugh, like something had startled her. I was small, but I knew startle. I turned another page. Again, the same photograph, only her face was different, eyes wide, lips making a perfect O like a round door. The room got too quiet. The telly had been blaring game shows a minute ago, and now it sounded like the set was underwater. I licked a thumb. Nana would have roared at me if she saw, and turned back, sure I'd confused myself. The pages fretted under my fingers. The photos lined up like soldiers, first with the hands, then with the O, then the smile. When I reached the end, I started again from the start, slower as if careful would make the world behave. Only now there was just the one photo, the normal one with the nice smile, and the plastic sleeve lay flat on it like a stubborn lid. Nana, I said, standing in the doorway with the album sliding against my knees, Mam is making faces. Is she indeed? Nana didn't look away from the kettle. The steam fogged her glasses. She had a way of knowing a thing and deciding she'd unknow it for peace. Back in the day, your mam was all elbows. Give the album here, pet. I handed it over and hovered while she turned the pages, the sleeves wheezing. She didn't hurry. This is your mam's class. That's all there is. Before, I said, pointing, she had her hands. I clapped my own over my mouth, a little show. And then she was saying, oh, like that. Nana made the kettle sound, that click of the throat that says enough now, and set the album under the sideboard. Don't be sassin' the dead things, she said. I didn't know if she meant old photographs or old days. Do you want a biscuit? I took the biscuit and a silence with it. In my head I said, Lily is playing tricks on me. I don't know where I got Lily. It was just a name that felt like a fingertip on my shoulder. After that, anytime something went wrong or right in a way that made no sense, I blamed Lily the way other children blame the wind. When I was 25 and old enough to roll my eyes at myself, A friend dragged me to a psychic in a flat that smelled like incense and damp towels. I went for the laugh. The woman had rings on rings and a voice like she'd swallowed smoke. I hadn't asked anything yet when she said, "Ah, you've a guide who's fond of you. Lily," she says. I hated how my throat did a trick, closing up like I'd swallowed a button. "Do you know she is?" I said, too sharp. "Not mine to know," she said, light as you please, and turned her cards. Maybe that primed me to see more. Or maybe I was just noticing the way you notice a neighbor only after they move away. When I moved in with my ex, 3 weeks of pretending we were grown and tidy, the plug for the kitchen sink disappeared. Not a small thing to lose. We'd had a row about dishes the night before. I was chopping onions when he reached for the plug and came up with air. "Where'd you put it?" he said. "I didn't. You're always doing this, hiding things." As if I had a drawer full of stoppers for the pleasure of tormenting him. We pulled out the undersink bin, checked the windowsill, the weird gap beside the cooker that ate socks and receipts. He went bright red, and I went small. I slept with my jaw tight, and my hands tucked under me like the mattress was the safest place to put them. Next day, I bought a new plug, walked home with it clacking in the bag, and set it on the counter with a stupid sense of triumph. After tea, the old plug was back. It was exactly where it always lived, the ring winking at me in the evening light. The new one sat beside it like a duplicate key you can't return. I must have made a sound because he came in, and for 1 second I saw the confusion soften his face, then melt away into something meaner that said if he admitted seeing it, he owed me an apology. So he didn't. He sniffed, said, "There. You found it," as if I'd been a child who'd hit her own toy, and the moment turned inside out. I said nothing. But the air in the kitchen had that feeling I remembered from Nana's, like a room after someone stops whispering. He gave me 100 other reasons to leave him, but in my head I always tacked the sink plug near the top of the list. You want to know if it's paranormal or a glitch? I used to think those were two different drawers, ghosts on one side, broken reality on the other. Now I think the drawers share a hinge. Sometimes a thing is wrong with the picture, and sometimes a person is standing just outside it smiling like they know the trick. I went back to Nana's after she died and asked Ma'am about the album. She'd rolled her eyes at the funeral until they almost left her head. "You and your notions," she said. "If Mum had a haunt, it'd be a bill she forgot to pay." Still, I went rooting. The album was there, under the same sideboard with a smear of polish turned to dust. I opened to the class photo with its crisp rose and my mother's tidy smile, and I waited for a page to turn itself. Nothing did. The sleeves crackled the same and lay flat again. I told Lily she was a coward, and the air turned cold enough that my fingertips stung. Or maybe I was only remembering the cold from all those Sundays. I think about the psychic more than I admit. I think about the way memory treats us, stitches and unpicks, and sometimes sews a whole new seam with the same thread. I think about Ma'am's face in 3 shapes of surprise, and how a child will take a name out of the air and make a companion from it. Story 3. I'd call myself forgetful, sure, but not that forgetful. I lose socks, hair ties, maybe the odd charger, but never something I'm actually using. That's why this one stuck. It was a Thursday, I think. My husband had gone to stay with his brother for a couple of days. The in-laws were at a veterans function somewhere up north, and for the first time in weeks the house was quiet enough that I could hear the hum of the fridge and the ticking of that cheap wall clock that always ran a bit fast. I remember the feeling of it, that calm kind of alone where everything's in its place. I made myself a cuppa, got into bed early with my laptop balanced on my knees, the light from the screen bouncing off the ceiling. My phone was sitting on the bedside table, face up, right next to the glass of water. Always in the same spot, so I could see Mum's messages pop up without having to touch anything. I keep my phone on mute, can't stand the constant pinging. I like to see things, not hear them. I played a game for a bit, checked a few messages, scrolled through the usual nonsense. Then I put the laptop aside, reached for the phone, and my hand landed on bare wood. At first I thought I'd just nudged it onto the floor. Happens. I leaned over the side, expecting to see the black slab glowing in the dark. Nothing. Just carpet. So I reached further, checked under the bed. Still nothing. I sat up, proper frown now, the kind you get when you know something's not adding up. The phone wasn't in the bed, not under the pillow, not in the sheets. I got up, thinking maybe I'd taken it with me to the bathroom without noticing. Checked the counter, no. Checked the kitchen bench, the lounge, even the top of the washing machine. Nothing. By the time I circled back to the bedroom, I was laughing at myself. "You're going mad," I said out loud. That's what you do when you're alone too long. You start talking to the walls. I walked in, flipped on the light, and stopped dead. There it was. My phone, sitting on the bedside table exactly where I'd left it, only now it was face down instead of face up. I froze. It was like walking into a photo of your own room, except something's been rearranged by someone who shouldn't exist. I stared at it so long that my throat started to go dry. Every part of my brain tried to explain it away at once. Maybe I'd put it there and just missed it? But that table's small, smaller than a dinner plate. You can't miss something sitting right in the middle of it. Maybe it had fallen, and I'd picked it up without remembering. Except I hadn't. I'd been in the kitchen 2 minutes, max. The room felt different, like the air had moved a step sideways. The silence wasn't empty anymore, it was dense. You know that heavy, cotton-thick quiet before a thunderstorm? That's what it was like. The shadows in the corners didn't look like the same shadows that had been there before. I stood there longer than I'd admit to anyone, half waiting for the phone to buzz or light up, for something to happen to prove time was still working properly. But it didn't. It just lay there, glassy and still, like it was pretending nothing had happened. When I finally picked it up, it was cold. Not room temperature cold, but fridge cold. My thumbprint should have smudged a little warmth into the screen. It didn't. I checked the time. 10:34, the same time I'd looked at the clock before leaving the room. I even checked the wall clock to make sure it hadn't stopped, but it was still ticking, a few seconds ahead like always. I sat on the bed, phone in my hand, and told myself to stop spiraling. Maybe the mind fills in blanks weirdly when you're tired. Maybe I'd imagined the gap on the table. I even typed out a text to my husband, something weird just happened, then deleted it. He'd only laugh, tell me I'd misplaced it, or worse, ask if I'd been drinking. That night I didn't sleep much. Every creak sounded closer than usual. At one point I thought I heard a faint tapping, soft, rhythmic, like fingertips on wood. I convinced myself it was the heating pipes, because what else could it be? Still, I kept the phone in my hand under the covers, screen off, thumb pressed against the side like I could feel the world through it. Morning came, and the house looked normal again. Light on the curtains, dust dancing in it, kettle whistling like nothing had happened. For a while, I almost convinced myself I'd dreamt the whole thing. But then I noticed something small that didn't fit. A faint rectangular outline in the dust on the table, next to where the phone had been, like it had been sitting there for hours. Only it hadn't. I'd cleaned that surface the day before. I tried to test it, to recreate it. I'd set the phone face up, turn around, leave the room, come back, see if it ever flipped itself. Nothing. Always exactly as I left it. Still, for weeks after, I couldn't shake that tiny shiver when I'd walk into the room. I kept the curtains open more, lights on longer, as if brightness could anchor things. A month later, my husband came back. The first night, I told him the story, half laughing, half waiting for him to tease me. He smirked and said, "So you're telling me ghosts like rearranging your phone now?" But then he frowned. "That's funny," he said. "When I got back last time, my charger was plugged into the wall upside down. The cable was bent weird, like someone had twisted it. We both looked at the phone on the nightstand then, face down again. Neither of us touched it." Story 4. My dad and I have this running bit where we argue about dumb things from way back like they're sworn testimony. Which gas station had the better breakfast pizza? Whether my first car's heater worked fine if you let it warm up. It didn't. The kind of stuff you talk about when you're washing dishes at his place and the game's on low in the other room. But this one got under my skin because it isn't about toppings or thermostats. It's about a memory that I can hold up to the light from 3 different angles, and it looks real every way I turn it. He says there was only one visit. I say 3. We're talking spring 2011, when I was 15 edging towards 16, still lanky and hopeful, and convinced distance could be solved with a full tank and a working CD player. I lived in Newton, Kendra lived in Cedar Rapids. We met online first, mutual friends, MySpace dust, Facebook messages that felt like secret notes slid between lockers. Her dad worked weird shifts, her little sister played soccer every weekend, and her house had that creak in the hallway floorboards you learned to step around. She was funny in the kind of way that didn't advertise itself, like finding a joke penciled into the margin of a math quiz weeks later. I was gone on her. That part isn't under debate. Dad says we drove out once in March. He remembers dropping me off at her place, and then he and my brother heading to some lake to fish, thick coats, white sky. He remembers a park later, me telling him about a swing set and how the creek smelled like pennies. He remembers waiting curbside, me climbing in damp at the cuffs. He He's not wrong. That happened. It's just that in my head it happened 3 separate times with 3 separate flavors I can still taste. Visit 1. We turned off our street onto a little park you could miss if you blinked. Early spring, that half-brown grass doing its best. The day was cool enough that your breath wouldn't show, but your fingers felt it on the bench slats. We walked slow loops, stopping every so often like we'd planned to arrive at those pauses all along. There was a swing set with one chain polished bright from hands, a creak with rust in it, a sign with rules no one had the energy to enforce. We talked about teachers and songs, and what we'd do in June like June was a country we both had passports for. My memory of that afternoon is a color, tarnished green. There's a picture I don't have of us grinning into each other's shadows. Visit 2. The day the rain came so steady the streets felt blurred. Dad again dropped me off, truck idling while he made his Duncan plan, and Kendra pulled me into that narrow hallway that smelled like laundry soap and garlic from last night. We went to her room and watched Finding Nemo on a half-busted TV, where the colors were a little oversaturated, faces too pink, water too blue. Her little sister's backpack was in the corner with a laminated tag, and the window glass puckered with old stickers. We lay on our stomachs on the floor because the bed springs squeaked if you looked at them, and we made dumb comments about Dory being the friend everyone actually needs. Later we walked in the rain to get her sister from school. No umbrellas, just hoodies and a shared grin. On the way back her dad came home early, boots heavy, eyes like a weather warning. He stood in the bedroom doorway and measured me like a 2x4. Out, he said, and didn't need to say more. I waited outside in the rain with my hands in my pockets and water creeping down my sleeves, watching each car that wasn't my dad feel like a mistake. When Dad finally pulled up, the cab smelled like coffee and old bait. We didn't talk much. The defroster wheezed. My socks made this soft complaint all the way back to Newton. Visit 3, the wee day. Sun high, her sister's soccer field a square of shouting and orange slices. Before the game we played bowling in her living room, and I learned how serious people can get about fake pins. I remember the strap around my wrist, the little me with hair that didn't look like me. Her dad was completely different this time, like a switch was flipped the other way. He stood in the kitchen talking Vikings football with my dad, both of them pretending the other team's choices made sense. I caught bits of it. Favre's retirement hangover, the line needing work, that look men get when they agree to disagree about something that doesn't cost them anything. After the game, we all stood by the field watching her sister score, and then miss, and then score again, and the sky felt larger than usual like someone had adjusted the aspect ratio. These aren't hazy impressions. They're separate days, separate clothes, separate temperatures. When Dad and I were arguing about it last weekend, I listed the details like I was trying to convince a jury. The creak of the hallway board by the third door, the chip in their microwave keypad, the smell of wet mulch by that park bench, the exact way her house numbers leaned on the siding like they were tired. He smiled that smile he gets when he knows he's about to win something by refusing to play. "Buddy, I only drove you there once," he said, washing a plate slow. "You're stitching details on one memory. Brains do that. Brains do that. I know they do. I've read those articles about confabulation, about how your mind will fill the potholes in the road, so the ride doesn't jolt. I get that. But here's the part that won't file. Each visit has its own weather system. I can still feel the seam of her carpet under my thumbnail from the Nemo day, the loop pile that leaves a little row of dents if you press too long. I can hear the ref's whistle at her sister's game, not quite cracking right. I can smell that creek's metal breath from the park, and the way the wet turned the dirt into a different color. Those aren't bolts I added later. They're things I picked up in my hands and pocketed. Dad didn't get mad. He doesn't do mad much anymore. He shrugged, said, "Fine, maybe twice," and grinned when I protested. I made some joke about quantum immortality, about dying in one dimension during that left turn out of Kendra's street and porting to a branch where we got a third try. He shook his head and told me to set the plates to dry. For a second, I saw that day in the rain reflected on the dishwater, the way the bubbles turned the kitchen lights into tiny planets. It made my heart knock once in a way I didn't expect. I don't have photos. We were kids. We didn't document everything like it was our job yet. There aren't geotag posts to triangulate. If Kendra has any, I don't know. We haven't talked in years. In my dad's version, I went once, we argued with a grumpy father, and I came home slightly damp and a little older. In mine, I went 3 times and learned 3 different lessons. How to walk slow in a park without trying to make the future hurry. how to stand in the rain and accept that some doors close not because of you but because that's what fathers do, and how to watch a game from the sideline with people who don't agree about much except that they're all going to keep showing up. Maybe I'm greedy. Maybe I wanted more visits than I got, and so I grew them like extra ribs to protect the soft things inside. Sometimes I think memories are like those repeating road signs on I-80. You pass the same green panel every few miles telling you how far to Des Moines, and after a while you're not sure which one you remember. Or maybe they're like the old Newton roller rink carpet, loud pattern on loud pattern, and if you look too long the swirls move. But sometimes, standing at my dad's sink with water up to my knuckles, I decide I'm allowed to keep the version where I went thrice. It's not hurting anyone. It fills the spaces the right way. Dad wiped his hands and said, "One day you'll have a kid who argues with you about something you know you're right about." I said, "Yeah, and they'll be correct." He laughed and tossed me a towel. On my way out I checked the back seat of my car, just for the old habit of it, like I might find a cold hoodie from a day that only happened once. Nothing there but a couple of fast food napkins and a scuffed CD case. I drove home past the park on our side of the state, watched some teenagers try to skip rocks on a pond that wasn't having it, and felt a kind of peace wash over me. Maybe it's 3 visits. Maybe it's one with echoes. On good days, it doesn't matter. On quiet nights, I can still hear the ref's whistle and the creek's penny breath, and that's enough to make me believe I got all the time I remember. Story 5. Years back, must have been 2016, give or take, my best mate and I had this habit of jumping on buses to anywhere that wasn't the same 3 streets of our small, boring town. South Coast-ish, nothing dramatic, just hedges and retail parks and people who know your mom. We'd pick a place off the timetable and go poke about. That day we took the bus to the next town over because someone at school had said, "Bluebell Forest's decent in spring," and that sounded better than sitting round his kitchen drinking instant coffee that tastes of damp cupboard. We got off near the shops, walked past a bakery that smelled like sugar burning a bit, and found the path in. The forest is one of those places that looks managed until it doesn't, proper path with a sign, then mud where the sign gives up. We weren't really prepared. Trainers, thin socks, hoodies that suck in the cold. He had a half-charged phone. Mine was basically a camera by then. We went in anyway, and the light went green in that way where you feel like you've stuck your head inside a bottle. The bluebells were mostly done, to be honest. A few stubborn patches clung on, the rest gone to leaves and that sweet, slightly moldy smell. We walked until the sound of the road faded, and it was just birds being opinionated at each other. We made little comments, the usual. "This is nice, innit?" And then after a while we stopped talking, because it was nicer that way. Time goes elastic in woods. You think we'll head back when the light changes, and then the light changes 5 times before you notice. We hit a fork and did the stupid thing, picked the smaller path because it felt like a secret. It took us out into a field, long grass, the sort you don't want to lie down in because you'll come up sneezing and covered in seed. The path didn't look like a path anymore, more the memory of one. We said, "Yeah, that way," and pointed our chins like we knew. Beyond the field was another strip of trees, a proper shaggy bit of woodland that looked older than the managed bit. We aimed for that with the brilliant logic of teenagers who think circles are just lines we haven't drawn yet. Inside that second the air felt different, quieter and a bit heavy. The ground had a layer of old leaves thick enough your foot sank and made that packed, breathy sound. We joked about horror films because of course we did. Then it got late, the quick sort of late where you look up and think, oh, the day's dropped a gear. We said we should cut back and find the main path. Except every back looked like further in. We weren't panicking exactly. Just that prickly feeling between your shoulder blades that says you should be closer to knowing where you are than you are. We came out into a cleared space with signs of people messing about. Old fire circle, beer cans, a pile of something that might have been a den once. A fence line beyond that, not neat, more like someone had kept vehicles out on purpose. There was a rusty sign half swallowed by bramble that said mod property in miserable capitals. We looked at each other in that way that says not it. We hadn't meant to end up in anything Ministry of Defense. The only thing I knew about mod land was you shouldn't be on it unless you want a telling off or worse. We could have turned back. We should have. But the light was going thin and gray, and the thought of retracing our wobble through the trees made my stomach feel hollow. The only visible way out was up, this steep slope where the leaves had slid and bunched so you couldn't get a grip. We scrambled anyway, hands in dirt, nails catching on roots. He swore at a bramble that put a line of blood on his wrist. My trainers gave up, and I did that slow-motion slide that dumps you on your tailbone and makes you want to cry laugh. We tried again, finding purchase where roots crossed like knuckles, and then suddenly my head popped above the line of the slope and the world changed. The trees ended like someone had sliced them off. On the other side, grass, short and municipal, and a road curving in front of us like we were at the bottom of AU. Houses stood in a tidy line, pebble dash and satellite dishes, wheelie bins tucked against low walls. The shift made my ears ring. We clambered the last bit and stood on the verge picking bits of leaf out of our sleeves, pretending we hadn't just been animals for 5 minutes. We had a left or a right. Left would take us back toward where the sun was going, we reckoned. Right looked closer to a loop if we squinted at the shape of the houses. We picked right because we're idiots, but also because right felt like we'd picked something. We walked. A corner, another corner. I had that relieved feeling you get when a random road suddenly looks like all the other roads you know, curb, drain, a faded slow painted on the tarmac that no one obeys. Then I saw the sign. Red octagon, white letters, stop. It was on a post at the end of a little spur of road, like a lip that led into nothing. It was so matter-of-fact it made my head tilt. I said and pointed. We should turn around. That'll be a dead end. Stop sign. He didn't even look at first. Yeah, cool. We turned, automatic as anything, and took about 5 paces the way we'd come. Then my brain caught up with my mouth. Hang on, I said, stopping dead. Stop doesn't mean dead end. That's not what that means. He stopped too, and you could see the thought run over his face like a cloud. He went, oh, right. Yeah. We both did that awkward little laugh people do when they've just been stupid in private and are trying to reset the scene. Shall we just? He gestured back the other way. I turned to look at the sign again. There wasn't a sign. Same lip of road, nothing at the end, a hedge behind it, a bit of fence with peeling paint. No post, no red octagon, no shadow of one, no bolts in the pavement, no patch of ground where a hole might have been filled. I felt my stomach go watery. I rubbed my eyes because that's what you do in cartoons, and apparently in real life when you think you've seen something that can't be there. He came back to stand beside me, squinting like that would conjure it. You saw that, right? I said, already hating my own voice for how careful it sounded. He scratched his cheek. I mean, you pointed at it, and I kinda didn't really look, and then when you said dead end I just went with it. It was there, I said. It was. I looked up at it. I could still see it in my head, as clear as if I'd taken a photo. The angle, the way you had to tip your chin a bit to meet it, the scuffed edge where the red had gone chalky. But the more I reached for the details, the more it felt like someone else was supplying them, like the certainty had been dropped into me from the outside, and now I was holding an empty wrapper. Let's just go, he said in that soft, not quite brave voice. We didn't run, but we walked with purpose, away from where the sign ought to have been. The estate curled us round and spat us back onto a bigger road with a bus stop that might as well have been a church. A timetable, a plastic shelter with someone's initials scraped into it, the comfort of knowing how to get home. We didn't say much on the bus. The lights flickered over the aisle and made everyone look a bit seasick. Back in our town, we bought a cheap kebab and ate it too fast and told jokes because that's how you cover a bump in the day. Story 6. I'm not the type to lose a thing I'm actively using. Misplace, sure, pens, receipts, a screwdriver that likes to roll under the fridge and live there a season, but not something I've had in my hand that day. That's why the flash drive got under my skin. I've got this old Windows 7 era laptop I tinker with. It wheezes if you ask too much of it, but it's fine for notes, streaming music, and messing around when I don't want to sit at my main desktop. I decided to wipe it and throw Linux on, give the old thing a second shot at usefulness. I made the installer on a little USB flash drive I've had for years, black plastic, silver swivel, the kind you could buy a dozen of from a bowl by a register. No key ring on it, just a notch where one could go. I finished the install in my room late afternoon. The bar filled, the screen did its reboot song and dance, and I shut it down feeling mildly pleased with myself. Small victory, you know? I pulled the drive out, spun it in my fingers, and set it on the shelf by my bedroom door. That shelf's my landing pad. Wallet, watch, a couple receipts I promise I'll sort later. I even remember the exact spot, right edge, pushed in a bit so it wouldn't get knocked. Next day I wanted to reinstall a different flavor and needed the drive again. I reached for it without thinking and came up with air. I scanned the shelf, bookends, a pair of sunglasses I never wear, dust. No flash drive. Okay, easy. I probably moved it absent-mindedly. I did the sensible pass first, desk, under the desk, top of the dresser, pockets of the jeans from yesterday. Nothing. Then I did the other sensible pass that doesn't feel sensible while you're doing it. Duvet corners, under the bed, even the shoes lined against the wall. I slid my hand along the baseboard for that click ricochet you get when something small hides in the dust. I widened the circle. Bathroom counter, kitchen counter, couch cushions. I checked the trash, even though I don't throw away anything the size of a thumb without noticing. When that found me nothing, I muttered a word my mother wouldn't be proud of and went out to check the car, because there's a version of events where I stuck it in my hoodie pocket, went out to the car to grab something, and set it down in there. It's dumb, but we all have those dumb versions. I drive a 2008 Impala. Not fancy, not embarrassing, held together by routine oil changes and Midwest stubbornness. I keep it locked like a reflex. I clicked it open, climbed in, and did a full sweep. Cup holders, that shallow tray in front of the shifter, the glove box with a nest of expired insurance cards. I paid special attention to the little cubby below the radio and climate controls, the one that's perfect for tossing phones, spare change, or, yes, a flash drive. It was empty except for some grit and a parking ticket stub. I checked under the seats by feel, the map pockets, even the spare coin pocket in the door. Nothing. I locked the car and told myself to drop it for now. Back inside, I did the ugly search. You know the one, pulling drawers out enough to peer behind them, flattening yourself on the carpet to look under furniture with a flashlight, patting down a jacket you haven't worn in weeks in case you've time-traveled by mistake. I even checked the laundry hamper because desperation doesn't mind laundry. At some point I laughed at myself, and then I stopped because it wasn't funny. By evening I had to accept that the thing had grown legs. It's a $10 drive, not a grandpa's watch, but still, there's a particular sting to losing something you can picture perfectly on a particular piece of wood. I told myself I'd just pick up another one after work and moved on with my night. Fast forward to the next morning. I had errands and figured I'd grab a replacement on the way back. I took my keys from their hook, heard the little jingle I always hear, and stepped out. The Impala beeped, that polite single chirp it does when you unlock it. I slid in, set my coffee in the cup holder, and put the key in the ignition. Habit. Before I back out, I glance down at that small cubby to toss my phone, otherwise it shifts around on the seat. And there it was. The flash drive lay dead center in the cubby, like someone had measured the distance from each edge and placed it just so. It wasn't caught under a receipt corner or snuggled against an old quarter. It was presented. The black plastic looked clean, cleaner than the tray around it, which had the usual sand of living, salt grit from winter, a couple crumbs of fiber or two. For a second I didn't touch it. I just watched it like it might twitch. The door had been locked. The car had been locked. I don't hide a spare key in the wheel well, or tape one under the bumper like a sitcom. Nobody else has access. The only way for that drive to be sitting there was if someone unlocked my car, put it there, and relocked it. Someone with my keys or better lockpicking than my neighborhood earns. Or, and this is the part one don't like saying out loud, if reality misplaced a small thing and put it back in the first neat place it thought made sense. I picked it up. It felt colder than the car, colder than the morning. It had that faint plastic smell mixed with something like dust. I ran my thumbnail over the swivel. The little wobble at the hinge was the same wobble I knew. If it was a different drive, it was a better impersonator than I am in any argument. I tried to work backwards. Could I have missed it the day before? I thought about that tray. When it's empty, it's an empty shape, shallow, all curves. Your eyes catch anything that doesn't belong there because there's nowhere for it to hide. I had stuck my fingers in that space, raked across it, lifted grit on my knuckles. It wasn't there. I checked the doors just to give my brain a bone. All locked. I checked the glove box, as if the car might have grown another compartment overnight. I even looked at the rear view like I'd catch someone ducking, which is stupid but reflex doesn't care. Then I put the drive in my pocket and sat a minute with the engine idling, heat not yet warm, feeling like I'd stepped into a frame that didn't match the one I left. I told no one that day. Who wants to be the person who says, "Hey, you know the universe"? It borrowed my flash drive and then left it in my car. Later, I told a friend who likes to prod at the weird, and he shrugged and said, "Matrix hiccup," which is a tidy way to put a sticker on a box that won't close. I wish I had a dashcam video of the cubby being empty, and then not empty. I wish I'd dusted for prints like a TV detective and found a thumb I don't own. What I actually have is this, a mental image of where I put the drive the day before, a list of all the places I looked, the memory of the impala's chirp, and a neat little rectangle sitting too perfectly in a tray I know I checked. Sometimes the proof isn't a photo. It's the feeling that you've been edited and handed back the scene with one prop moved.